All right, now we're continuing in our series reviewing the 3 years of President Bola Tinubu's administration. A very sensitive issue we want to discuss this morning is energy, power, electricity, whichever you want to call it. We know is at the heart of production, at the heart of manufacturing, at the heart of every economic activity anywhere in the world, not just Nigeria. Let's see how we have fared in that area in the last 3 years. Now, we start by looking at the national grid. Yes, collapse of the national grid, where reports have it that under the current administration, we've had about 20 documented, so that means we may have some not documented, 20 documented collapses under the current administration. Largely, the reason behind it, mostly thermal plant gas shortages. Yes, Nigeria is supposed to be known as a gas-abundant nation. Nigeria has installed generation capacity of about 13 gigawatts and about 14 gigawatts. But of course, actual generation and transmission, we know, it's less than 5,000. That's what we've been experiencing for many years now. Sources indicate that Nigeria achieved its highest ever electricity generation of 6,003 megawatts. Megawatts. Capacity, gigawatts. But generation, the biggest, the highest, in March 2025, 6,000 megawatts. Average daily generation increased from about 4,100 megawatts in the third quarter of 2023 to 5,700 megawatts in the first quarter of 2025. That is about 40% growth. There's been obviously some plans and movements by the government to improve the energy situation in the country. A major one has been the Landmark Electricity Act, which decentralizes the sector and allows subnationals to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. Many states have been able to hit that even as we speak. We know that there's been domestication of the act in states like Lagos. But has it really started working? That's the question that we would ask. The government has also given a 3.3 trillion naira legacy debt plan to settle long-standing obligations accumulated between 2015 and 2025, so not just in the present administration, and owed to power generating company, the GENCOs, and gas suppliers. Debt repayment strategy, which includes cash injections, promissory notes, and royalty agreements, those have also come into play, and the presidency has secured approximately $60 billion in energy sector investment and pipeline commitments. Then, most recently, we remember the cancellation of a $717 million loan from the World Bank. Of course, both parties agreed to cancel it with factors that they do not meet in the middle. And then, of course, we have the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. We've had the tariff hikes. We've had the Ban A and Ban B and Ban Z. I don't know which one you belong to. The promise of at least 20 hours of electricity a day, is that still on? But we've also seen a lot of movements in mini-grid through rural electrification and, of course, renewables. That has also come into the mix. So this is a summary of the 3-year journey of Nigeria's energy sector under President Bola Tinubu. Let's get the views of Mr. George Atome, his director of West Power and Gas Limited, joins us now to share his perspective, and perhaps, since he's inside that sector, maybe we can know one or two things that the government and the private sector are doing. Mr. Atome, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nini. Nice to be here.
Great to have you, sir. So what's your perspective? I just shared some highlights, of what has been happening in the energy. If you want to capture it in a few sentences, have we been gaining or missing in the last 3 years?
First of all, the way you unpacked it shows the multifaceted nature of the power sector issues. From generation to transmission from gas to generation to transmission, to distribution, to metering, to mini grids. This is also multifaceted. But let me start this way. The government itself realized that the policy upon inception of electricity in Nigeria of more or less not commercializing it has suddenly done them in, because they were not expected, as it were, to make money from giving people power. So it was essentially like a social service. But I haven't realized that, and the population growing, demands increasing, they've had to come up with innovative ways of giving power to people, um, in commercially, but at the same time, not putting too much burden on consumers, given the fact that you need to win people off what used to be like a freebies to a market-driven tariff situation. So that journey has had to look at a conglomerate, this humongous behemoth that was initially ECN, then NEPA, then PHCN, and now to what we have it to be. One thing I'll tell you, though, is that the privatization of the sector has actually democratized knowledge. That me and you can even sit down, talk, disaggregate the sectors, begin to see how they all interplay. For me, is a major win. And as they say, once you know what the problem is, you have 50% through to the solution. And what our knowledge of the problem is has now told us that it is really huge and multifaceted, but it's achievable. First and foremost, we've run a national grid system for as long as I can remember. What the 2023 Act has done is to disaggregate it and get states involved. That will be a game changer. It's early days yet. But it will be a game changer, because then you will begin to find that states will look for comparative areas of advantage. Those states, like in the northern states that have a lot of sun, will depend a lot on solar energy as part of the energy mix. Those in the oil producing belt will be looking at gas, and those and then don't forget hydro as well. It's also a very veritable source. Now, how do you then bring all these things together? That is the real challenge, because no matter how efficient you are in one segment of the value chain, if the other one is weak, it comes to naught. So if you have the gas, you can generate, you can't transmit, is a problem. If you can generate, transmit, and you can't distribute, is a problem. If you can generate, transmit, distribute, but you're unable to collect because meters are not there, that's also a problem. So we must look for a solution that then gives us a holistic that makes for a holistic approach to solving the problem. So I would say the 3-year journey has been, let me say, learning from the enormity of the task ahead of us, and now creating the legal and regulatory framework that will enable us attract investment. Because the primary issue here is liquidity. How do you get money into the sector? You've talked about subsidies, you've talked about World Bank loans, you've talked about so many different things. It just speaks to one thing. If there's no liquidity in the sector, investors will be weary to come in. Because the average investor expects that if he puts in money, there is a clear path about how he can recover that investment.
All right.
This is the reason.
All right,
This
Mr.
is the
Itunu.
reason. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about liquidity, and I know you've always harped on that whenever we have this discussion. We've seen tariff hike, we've seen the bans, we've seen at least partial removal of subsidy, we've seen the attempt by the government to deal with the legacy debts. Would you say these have made any impact when we talk about liquidity and creating incentive for investors in the sector?
I would say yes, but the impact may not be felt the way we all expect it to be felt. I always liken it to somebody who's like 100 feet below the ground. You manage to dig your way up to 50 feet. But because you're not yet on the surface, people will not know that you have done 50% of the job. So getting the legal and regulatory framework in place is a huge step. Dealing with legacy debts is another huge step, and these debts are not something to be toyed with. Then, three, creating the investment climate through market-driven tariffs is also a good step. So the steps have been taken. The thing is now to see how investors and consumers react to it. We always look only at the government side. We're not looking at the consumer side. Because many people have been so used to taking electricity without paying for it. One of the biggest, the nightmares of distribution companies is the bypassing of their meters. And that's, for me, it's a citizenship cry. We must all live up to being good citizens. Even if you're not bypassing and you know somebody who is bypassing, it's good to say so, because one way or the other we all pay. And I can tell you how bad some of these things are. In the cause of bypassing, distribution equipment are destroyed, cables are destroyed, meters are destroyed. And the cabling system is such that if a long cable, a 300-meter cable, is cut at any point, even if you go back and join it, the integrity is questioned. It's a question of time. It will get a problem. So the distribution company has to invest in replacing the entire length, as opposed to just getting that portion that was destroyed. So these are the sort of things we must all know and begin to understand that as citizens too, who expect so much from the sector, we should also understand our role, and we should also play that role correctly. Overall, I always tell you that I speak from the point of view of an optimistic person. Overall, as I say, we know where the pain points are, and we're beginning to address them. The legal and regulatory framework is in place. Lagos State recently announced plans to inject as much as 4,000 megawatts. That is what we receive today averagely. If that sort of power can be embedded directly into the state through the disco networks of ECO and Ikeja, it will make a huge difference. And that will be a cue for other states.
All right.
Those states had done it under Governor Obaseki when they had the Osiomo plans, which at that time looked expensive, but with the benefit of hindsight now, it was the best thing to do, because they stopped relying on grid power, and they were getting power directly from the gas field. And they laid the infrastructure, and all their ministries, all their government departments were powered. But today, unfortunately, we've gone back to the old days, relying on BEDC, and it's been a disaster.
All right, Mr. Itomi.
One word for mini grids before I run off. One word for mini grids. Because of the overdependence on the national grid, the mini grid regulations is something investors should look at. The regulations are out. It allows investments in catchment areas. You can look at targeted investment, an estate, a cluster of industries. You work with, especially in underserved and unserved areas, and go and build your mini grids. In other words, you don't need to work with the national grid. And if at some point you want to interface with national grid, it's also possible. But you can begin to look for these solutions outside what the major grid, which we always what we talk about. And finally, I know the grid expansion has started, and let's give it time. A lot of equipment just needs to be changed, and then we need to deploy modern techniques to solve things of theft, because we need to digitize the grid so that you can account for power.
All right, Mr. Itomi. So, even from your explanation, it is obvious that providing electricity to Nigerians is a complicated one. So can one say that perhaps President Tinubu did not look close enough before he made that promise, because that's what a lot of people are saying. You promised us that in 4 years, your first term, that you're going to give us electricity. And so if you don't, then we shouldn't vote for you. So perhaps President Tinubu did not look close enough before making that promise. And now that he has seen it, do you think that it's a problem that can be solved in 4 years?
Yes. Yeah. No, no, no. But you see, that's like I said, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe he should not have said what he said. But I think the intention behind it was to show his determination to solve the problem. Because there is nobody who is connected with power that will not want to solve it. Because power just speaks to the happiness of people. It is not just your normal, let me pay for it. People will pay the city power. Otherwise, what we all spend to self-generate is far more expensive. If we had expensive grid power alone, it would be affordable. Ask many people now who have installed solar and coal, who are depending less on the grid. They're smiling. But having said that, because politicians are who they are, they make electricity too much. They bring too much politics into electricity, and that's why all these promises, I'll do it in 6 months, in 2 years, in 3 years. I would just say, in my opinion, leave it out. Just let people understand what you plan to narrow the power gap. It will take quite a lot because Millennium Development Goals tell us that for rapid development, you need 1,000 megawatts per 1 million of your population. If we're 200 million, we're looking for 200,000 megawatts. We're nowhere close to that. But if we can move from where we are now, there is 13,000 installed. First of all, work to evacuate that, then increase it to 20 to 30 as you go. It will make a significant difference.
All right.
And that's the trajectory we should take, similar to what happened with telephones.
Okay.
We didn't achieve 200 million penetration in 1 or 2 or 4 years of these mobile phones coming in. It took time, and that's what we need to know. And that steady progress is what breeds consumer confidence, so people can pay for what they consume.
All right, Mr. Tomi, how would you react to the perspective that perhaps why it seems so difficult to give power to Nigeria is because there are some individuals, corporates, politicians who are benefiting from the importation of generators and all of that. So they also create hurdles in the path of progress.
Well, we've had all that talk. I can't rule out the fact that there will always be vested interests that would slow down a program. But I don't think those interests can overpower a determined government's desire to make power work. There is no program you want to do that you won't find vested interest trying to block it. Look at what's happening to Dangote refinery. We were importing petroleum products. He's now started doing it. They are accusing him of monopoly and they want to start re-importing. You will always find those shenanigans, but it should never be a reason not to have a clearly planned program and then stick to that plan, because it is sticking to the plan that breeds confidence in investors. And if investors have the confidence, the money will come in.
All right, so finally,
it's a good business. It's a good business if you know what you're doing.
Okay, finally, the other side, which is the consumers, the citizens, you noted the impacts, the negative impacts of bypassing meters. How do we solve that problem? It's been on for ages. How do we make people stop this?
Well, well, there's legislation that's criminalizing it. So I guess enforcement will help, but I think citizen education should be one of the major focus. Wherever we find ourselves, whether the local government levels, whether the community levels, estate levels, I think we should all begin to understand that if we do not behave like corporate citizens, then the hurt caused by one is a harm done to so many. When we got into eco-disco, you'll be amazed at the level of bypasses we're getting in what you might call highbrow areas. Some of them, you may say everybody was doing it, so they joined to it. It's not an excuse. But very many of them, when we got onto them, just basically started doing the right thing. and they started giving up those who were bypassing. But citizens' education, that is a matter of discipline. You just need to be disciplined about these things. So, enforcement of existing legislation, self-discipline, community vanguard will help.
All right, Mr. George Atomi, thank you so much for your time and your
Thank
views
you.
on the program. Director, West Power and Gas Limited, thank you so much.
Bye.